the beginning that you have made.
Martin Indyk was born in London, England. He was raised and educated in Australia, where he turned to international relations, made his career in the United States, and wound up being the first and second Jewish-American ambassador to Israel, in which he played a major role in the peace process of the 1990s. All of which seems to beg the question, does it ever get confusing?
I have a case of triple loyalties.
It's not a question of loyalties, but a case of identities, isn't it?
No, it's been a search for identity from the beginning.
Can you try and share the conclusions with us?
No, the journey continues. But part of it was to come to Israel when I was a postgraduate student. And I enrolled here in the Hebrew University to do a master's degree in international relations. It was the summer of 1973. And I started studying Hebrew at the Ulpan HaKayetz. And just before classes were supposed to start, the war broke out. And I was in Jerusalem for the Yom Kippur War. And then as a mitnadev, a volunteer, I went into a kibbutz in the south. And that was a kind of defining moment for me in terms of my search for identity.
In what way?
I sat up at night listening on my radio to the BBC reports of Henry Kissinger flying in to get the ceasefire. And from that moment on, I became absolutely obsessed about the idea that I too should play some role in trying to make Israel safe, because that would make me safe. And,
do you really feel
through diplomacy. My interest was in international relations. And so I went back to Australia and did my PhD on the role of the United States in resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict. Kissinger and Sadat were my heroes. And I never knew exactly how it would work out, but I knew my job in life was to try to help Israel make peace. So my journey led by purely serendipitous circumstances to Washington, where I set up a think tank, and to Bill Clinton, where I became his advisor during his election campaign, to the White House, right at the moment when all of Israel's Arab neighbors under the Madrid conference were negotiating with Israel. Rabin had been elected, and there was a chance to make peace. And I was at the side of the President of the United States advising him
What did
on
it
the
feel
peace
like?
process. It felt like Beshet, somehow God was watching me. He wanted me to do this. How else could you explain it? That 10 years after, an Australian professor comes to Washington, there he is at the precise moment that the peace process is opening up. And then 2 years later, after the Oslo Accords and the Israel-Jordan peace treaty, Clinton sends me to Israel as the first American Jewish ambassador to Israel. And 5 months later, Rabin is assassinated. And so from the heights, thinking we're almost at the summit, I told Clinton before I left, we got 2 more agreements to go, one with Syria and one with Lebanon. And, he said, I want you to work on the Syrian one. And then suddenly, Rabin is gone and the whole peace process craters. And I go back to Washington, I'm Assistant Secretary for the Middle East in the State Department, and it's really tough. Everybody's giving us a hard time. Saddam Hussein, Bibi Netanyahu, it's really terrible. And then suddenly, Netanyahu's government collapses, Barak gets elected, and Barak comes to Washington and asks Clinton to send me back to work with him to get the peace deal with the Syrians and with the Palestinians, the final deals. And I come back to Israel, I have a second chance. And I would come up to Jerusalem, and in my spare time between meetings, I would scout around the real estate to see where we will put the embassy and where we will put the residence. And I really believed that it was going to happen this time. And it all cratered again.
Will it ever happen?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We have to watch the end of the movie. It hasn't ended yet. But I've never given up on my belief that it will happen.
I want to catch you by your words. You said that you wanted to make Israel safe for you to feel safe. You're now an accomplished person. You've played a part on the world stage. You're well recognized the world over. Do you really feel that you won't be safe if Israel will not be safe? Is that really a sense that you carry with you?
Well, I think it's a sense that every Jew carries with him or her in one way or another. There is that basic insecurity, that's the dark part of our hearts that is a product of our history, over thousands of years. How can it not be in our DNA by now? That sense that suddenly it can all be gone again. And every generation there's a new devil that arises that wants to destroy the Jewish people in one way or another. Now we have, Ahmadinejad in Iran. So I think it's true.
So I'd like to turn now from looking inside to looking outside. You spend a lifetime doing political and diplomatic work and international relations, and you're obviously very much in touch with your Jewish roots. So what does the world look like from Jewish perspective?
It actually looks like an amazing place for the Jewish people in my time. This is in many ways feels like a golden age for the Jewish people.
In what sense?
In the sense that for all of the talk about rising anti-Semitism and so on, we are a free people. We have our own land. We are free to exploit our talents in countries like the United States, where Jews have had amazing experience this last century and risen to some of the highest offices in the land, of immense influence beyond their numbers in every area of creative activity. So it feels very good to be a Jew in these years.
So what are the challenges at a time like this? It is such a golden age.
The biggest challenge is for Israel to achieve peace with its neighbors, particularly with the Palestinians. Well, we have to try harder, and we have to try to put ourselves in their shoes as well, listen to their concerns. And it can be done. If I look at the trajectory of history from the three no's of Khartoum back in 1968, when the whole Arab world said, we'll never talk to Israel, we'll never recognize Israel, we'll never have peace with Israel. Now the Arab League has repeated again that all of the Arab states will end their conflict with Israel if it solves the Palestinian problem. And it's not as if we don't know what the deal needs to look like. It's not as if, on both sides, there aren't majorities in favor of this deal. The problem is, how do we get from here to there? And that's going to take a lot of hard work and belief again in our partners on the other side.
And when that happens, what happens then?
Well, then we'll all start fighting each other.